Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Nishcast. It's the Diggity Doodah, Dr. Peptide Panther, Mr. Slippers, here to talk through NRL Finals footy as well as the first round of NRL Women's, which was an interesting first round of NRL Women's footy. We'll get on to that after I roll through these Kiwi NRL angles of the Finals footy that we saw over the weekend. There were wins for the Roosters over the Rabbitohs. The Canberra Raiders defeated Melbourne Storm down in Melbourne. Manly Seagulls were too good for the Cronulla Sharks. And then Sunday evening you had the Parramatta Eels defeating the Brisbane Broncos 58 points to zip. And I'll start with that Eels versus Broncos game because it's hard to go too deep into like stats and all that stuff when one team has scored 58 points, 58 points and is blatantly sizzling on fire, and then the other team, Brisbane Broncos, looked fairly mediocre. Brisbane Broncos, see you later alligator, and also Cronulla Sharks, see you later as well. So next weekend's footy, we've got Rabbitohs versus Seagulls, that's on the Friday night. And then Melbourne Storm versus Parramatta Eels, that's on the Saturday night. That game is in Melbourne, which is important because Parramatta Eels won't be at Bankwest Stadium, where they are a fairly intimidating unit. Parramatta Eels had Dylan Brown in the halves. They had Manu Ma'u on an edge. And then you had Marata Niukore playing off the bench as well, which was good. Parramatta Eels just too good. And Brad Takarangi came off the bench as well, So Brad Takarangi, 5 runs, 64 metres in 25 minutes, cool. Marata Niukore, 11 runs, 106 metres, fantastic. Manu Ma'u, exactly 10 metres per run, 14 runs, 140 metres. And then Dylan Brown had his running shoes on. He had 8 runs for 87 metres, so again, above that 10 metres per run mark, but with Dylan Brown you had a try assist as well, line break assist. He had equal touches as Mitchell Moses, 52 touches for Dylan Brown and 51 touches for Mitchell Moses, but Mitchell Moses did the bulk of the kicking, so I'd consider that a fabulous game from Dylan Brown in the halves. First NRL Finals game, as I alluded to in my preview. And I don't think the Broncos, it's hard to judge this Eels performance too much because the Broncos, in the context of Finals footy, the Broncos kind of suck. So I'm not going to shout out Dylan Brown for being amazing and playing a fantastic supporting role to Mitchell Moses. Didn't have too much pressure on him. Team was on fire. And so it's just like everyone in that Eels team was performing at a high level against a fairly mediocre finals team. So will be interesting going forward, going down to Melbourne Storm against a hostile Storm team who want to bounce back after their loss. You know, what kind of pressures put on Dylan Brown in the halves and how that plays out. But I'll save all that for the preview. But good performance from the Parramatta Eels and a couple of strong contributions from their Kiwi NRL crew. Broncos, as for the Broncos, yeah, whatever, who cares. We'll go back to the Friday night game where the Roosters were too good for the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Roosters, when they're in that sort of mood, everything's clicking. You got so many options across the park, but most notably, you've got a forward pack that I don't think there's a forward pack in the NRL who I would say is better than the Roosters. There's, I'd say, the Melbourne Storm and Canberra Raiders have forward packs who are equal to, if not slightly behind, but no NRL team, no team in the finals has a better forward pack than the Roosters, and that was on show against the Rabbitohs. Sure, there was no Sam Burgess for the Rabbitohs, but you still had Jared Waerea-Hargreaves in dominant form. Still one of the kind of most hated Kiwis players from Kiwis people. It's kind of weird. Everyone just assumes that he's a ill-disciplined, reckless kind of dude, and he didn't concede a penalty against the Rabbitohs. But he is, especially like recent years under Trent Robinson, Jared Waerea-Hargreaves, I'd say like past this season and last season, he's kind of hit a low-key neck level for the Roosters. You've had the likes of Dylan Napa and Kane Evans leave the Roosters, and their forward pack's all good. That's underestimated, is that the Roosters farewelled Kane Evans and Dylan Napa ahead of this season, who are two, I'm not going to say that they're forwards of any epic quality. They are good, strong, NRL quality forwards for sure, like consistent NRL forwards. And you take two of those dudes out of the Roosters team and everything's the same, because you've got guys like Waerea-Hargreaves leading this forward pack. He had 15 runs for 167 metres, which is immense. Well over 10 metres per run. He had a couple of tackle busts. He had an offload as well. Isaac Liu was strong. 11 runs, 129 metres. Also well over 10 metres per run. And then the bloke I said to watch out for was Sio Siua Taukeiaho, Otara Scorpions. And he was amazing. Absolutely amazing. He scored a try. And he played 38 minutes off the bench. Now, Waerea-Hargreaves started. He ended up playing 41 minutes, so they're similar minutes. But just look at this workload from Taukeiaho. 15 runs in 38 minutes off the bench. Anytime Sio Siua Taukeiaho is having 15 runs, you're going to get freakish efficiency with that. So Taukeiaho, 15 runs, 156 metres. Taukeiaho also had 62 post-contact metres, which was the most of any Roosters forward. Not surprising. He had a tackle bust as well. But that impact is what makes the Roosters even better. Last round of the NRL season, they lost to the Rabbitohs and Taukeiaho wasn't playing. Now he comes back and he's coming off the bench. I like Isaac Liu starting just because it pushes Taukeiaho into that impact role, and it's like that second wave, because that second wave for the Roosters features Angus Crichton. It features Zane Teravano. Zane Teravano from Tokoroa, he had 8 runs for 81 metres. So highly efficient work from Zane Teravano, 10 metres per run. And that second wave just could be viewed as demoralising. Like, you have a strong start to the game, you're going toe for toe with the starting forwards, and then just as the Roosters settle into the game and they put a few tries away, they score a few points, they're feeling good, then Taukeiaho comes on. Oh, try stopping that. Try getting slow play the balls from a dude who was one of the most efficient forwards in the NRL. So that's the Roosters. They also had Joseph Manu playing as well. Joey Manu, 14 runs, 130 metres, try, and that try assist. Now, that try assist where he got the ball on the right and then faked with his eyes. I love what Joseph Manu did with his eyes in that try assist. Is he's looking inside, he's looking inside, like inside, not like directly to his left, but just watching, like eyeing up defenders on the inside, and then because of his eyes looking inside, the Rabbitohs defense kind of neglect the fact that Joey Manu is running to the outside line and thus creating a 2-on-1. Usually, if Joey Manu is running towards the sideline at right centre, if he's running the outside line, his eyes are going to be straight ahead, or he's going to be looking to the winger and waiting for the winger to pounce in. Then he's going to give a pass to his winger, to Joseph Manu's winger, who is Brett Morris in this case, I think. What Joey Manu did in the try assist was that he was looking inside. So he's running the outside line, but his eyes are inside, and then as soon as the Rabbitohs winger bit and came infield, that's when he gives a flick pass. So it's like, I'm not sure if Joey Manu needs to do that. He's got the footwork and he's got the hands to be able to just run an outside line, do nothing tricky with his eyes, and then just shovel a pass on as soon as the Rabbitohs winger bites. But what Joey Manu did was he ran the outside line and then he faked with his eyes pretty much, because he's looking inside but he's running outside the whole time, and then he gives a flick pass, which ends up being a no-look flick pass, which is insane. That is pure playmaking centre excellence. So shout out Joey Manu, because it looks like a simple no-look flick pass, which isn't simple at all. But when you watch Joey Manu's eyes in that try assist, how he's blatantly making it obvious that he's looking inside, and it's not just like a moment where he pulls a no-look flick pass. It's a couple of seconds of looking inside, running outside, then the flick pass, which makes it amazing. Just simply amazing for Joey Manu. And he is firing on all cylinders, which is good to see at this stage of this season. Manly Seagulls were defeated Cronulla Sharks 28-16. All I'm really interested here about is the Sharks, to be honest. It's the Sharks. And if we're talking Sharks, we're talking Shaun Johnson. That's just how it is. So Shaun Johnson didn't have any tackle busts, I believe. No tackle bust for Shaun Johnson. And how many runs did old Shawnee have? 7 runs for 53 metres. Now, for some context, Chad Townsend, his fellow half, had 9 runs for 58 metres. So Chad Townsend had more runs than Shaun Johnson, which, sure, he only had 2 more runs, but given Shaun Johnson's skill set, you want Shaun Johnson running far more than Chad Townsend. Think of their skill sets, what they offer. Chad Townsend, I believe Chad Townsend's talked about this himself, where he views himself as like a quarterback, a rugby league quarterback, in the sense that he's organising, that he is directing traffic, a classic halfback, you could say. Shaun Johnson, on the other hand, very dynamic runner of the footy. He's got speed and he's got that footwork that we all know and love. And Shaun Johnson, as is reflected of the stats, I believe Shaun Johnson's kicking game is underrated. He's got a fantastic long kicking game. But the disparity between Shaun Johnson's 13 kicks against Manly Seagulls and then his 4 and then Chad Townsend's 4 kicks, you don't want that. You want an even split of kicks with those 2 halves. There were a couple of kicks that went dead as well from Shaun Johnson. But the point here is about the running game. If you've got Shaun Johnson and Chad Townsend, I want Shaun Johnson running at least 5 times more 5 more times than Chad Townsend. I don't even want it to be close. I don't want Chad Townsend with 5 runs and Shaun Johnson with 6 runs. I don't want Shaun Johnson with 11 runs and Chad Townsend with 10 runs. However many runs Chad Townsend has, I want Shaun Johnson to have at least 5 more runs. Because that's what Shaun Johnson does best. So if he's only putting up the same running kind of numbers as Chad Townsend, despite being a astronomically better runner of the footy than Chad Townsend, you're going to have issues. And that was the issue for the Sharks, was just there were a couple of issues against Manly Seagulls, but when I just look at these, like, how did Shaun Johnson go? Shaun Johnson needs to run the footy a whole lot more, and if you're playing a game of footy where Shaun Johnson has no tackle bus, something is obviously wrong. Britton Nakora was also playing in this game, played the full 80, wasn't overly dynamic or with any great effectiveness in his running game. And then the only Sharks player who averaged 10 metres per run or more was our man, Braden Hamlin-Uele. Coming off the bench, he had 10 runs for 109 metres. He had 1 more tackle bust than Shaun Johnson, and he only played 28 minutes. So again, Braden Hamlin-Uele was the only Sharks player to average over 10 metres per run. And he's the rookie. He's the young buck coming off the bench to give it that hectic, crazy, ruthless impact off the bench. And he did exactly that, and he was the only Shark to do so, which is a fabulous way to end the season for Braden Hamlin-Uele. I've talked about it for a while now. Hopefully he's in the Kiwis squad, because his form for the Sharks definitely warrants closer inspection, and hopefully next season Braden Hamlin-Uele can build upon that. Melbourne Storm versus Canberra Raiders. Now, just about the vibe of this game, the Storm got beaten by a better team. And I believe there are areas... I believe the Storm were well below their best. I believe the Storm just didn't quite show up with the typical level of intensity and aggression and clinical class that we've come to expect from the Storm. And the Raiders were good. The Raiders were near their best. However, if a couple of different things happen in that game, the Storm win. So I say that to say that I'm not any more excited or impressed about what the Raiders can do in the remaining weeks because of that victory. It just felt like the Storm was slightly off, and then a few things went against them as well. And the Raiders just won the game of footy. But it doesn't make me believe that the Raiders are premiership favourites to any great level. I didn't actually, other than they talked about in the commentary as well, other than the Raiders just hanging in there, gritting their teeth and just staying in the contest. Other than that, I didn't see anything in the Raiders to suggest that they are head and shoulders better than the Roosters or Melbourne Storm, let alone same level of premiership favoritism. The Raiders were good. They were better than the Storm, but there's no oh my god, the Raiders are gunning for the title. They got to do a few more things in the remaining 2 games that they will play. They got to show a bit more to make me believe that they are genuine premiership contenders, favourites. There was still quite a bit of ill discipline. There are a couple of weird errors and mistakes, and I think if they come against a top-tier team who are feeling especially ruthless, I think they could struggle against an aggressive team coming at them. In Melbourne, in that game, the Raiders were the team going at the Melbourne Storm. And you look at the personalities in that Raiders team, I believe they are more comfortable going at their opposition instead of having to deal with the pressure that their opponents are putting against them. In terms of Kiwi NRL players, Bailey Simonson had a fantastic evening, considering he was a very late or very early inclusion with the Joey Leilua situation. Joey Leilua got a firework in the eye or whatever, so Bailey Simonson went out to play on the wing. He scored a try very early in the game. He had 19 runs for 182 metres, which was the most of any Raiders back. He had 2 line breaks, 6 tackle busts. So that basically says that Nick Kotrick only played 20 odd minutes or whatever, so he is a very dynamic runner of the footy himself, but you got Leilua, you got Rapana, you got Shans Nickel-Klokstad, and yet Bailey Simonson, the New Zealand Sevens player, father played for the All Blacks, I believe. It was Bailey Simonson who had the most impact in that backline. Joey Tapine, 9 runs for 70 metres, so not a huge running game from Joey Tapine. He did play 69 minutes, so he got through a fair amount of work there. Let me just check his tackles. 35 tackles for Joey Tapine. That's a fair amount. That's a fair amount for him, and usually someone like that, you want them putting more energy into what they do with the footy. But big minutes for Joey Tapine and a lot of defensive work as well, which was interesting to see. It's not how I would use Joseph Tapine, but it's a good thing for Joey Tapine to do, like finals game in Melbourne, and just get through like a workhorse type of performance. So good on Joey Tapine. Iosia Soliola only played 19 minutes, which was a bit weird, but when you've got someone like Josh Papali on the bench and then younger forwards like Corey Horsburgh and Emre Gula, no surprises. Well, it's a surprise that Soliola only played 19 minutes, but you've got so many options in that Raiders forward pack for Ricky Stewart that I'm sure, like in coming finals games, Soliola will get those minutes back. Melbourne Storm, Jerome Hughes in the halves. He was pretty good. Wasn't a standout player. He and Munster both had, Munster had 3 tackle busts, Hughes had 4. Hughes had a try assist with the kick, I believe, as well. And Hughes played a typically basic style of play that you see with the Melbourne Storm. So Munster had 42 touches, whereas Jerome Hughes had 26 touches of the footy. And then the kicking was shared. 5 kicks for both Munster and Hughes, and then you've got Cameron Smith with 3 kicks, you've got Pappenhausen with 3 kicks, and so on. So you got lots of variety in the kicking game, and it was Hughes who, a lot of his involvement was through kicks, so he had half the touches of Munster, but he had the same number of kicks. I would like to see Hughes get a bit more running footy, but I think it was just circumstances in this game because Cameron Munster didn't get a whole lot of open space footy as well. Jesse Bromwich, 11 runs, 105 metres. Solid, slightly below par for Jesse Bromwich. Nelson Asafa-Solomona brought that energy. He had 12 runs for 119 metres, 37 minutes. 2 tackle busts. And then Kenny Bromwich, 80 minutes, 7 runs, 68 metres. And that's it. So those are good numbers in the starting forward pack, but not the best. Not the best from Jesse Bromwich. Not quite the best from Nelson Asofa-Solomona. Not the best from Kenny Bromwich. Brandon Smith played big minutes. 45 minutes for Brandon Smith coming off the bench. Wowza. But he only had 6 runs. So that's what I'm saying. The Melbourne Storm were just like, instead of being how they're usually at 9 out of 10 most weeks, the Melbourne Storm were kind of operating at 6 or 7 out of 10, which can defeat most teams in the regular season. Like, if you've got a Melbourne Storm team where everyone's playing at like a 6.5 out of 10, they're going to roll over any of the shit teams. But in a finals game of footy, regardless of who you are and regardless of who you're playing, finals footy, you need to be 8, 8.5, 9 out of 10. And the Melbourne Storm were just a few levels below their best. And one of those things was offloads. Let me go, just bear with me as I open up some wider stats. The Storm only had 1 offload in that game. Now, that's not many, if any. 1 offload from the Melbourne Storm. So someone like Nelson Asofa-Solomona, no offloads. Cameron Munster was the only one to have an offload. The Storm are second to last in offloads, so that's in keeping with their trend, which was a bit interesting. I'm just trying to check if let me go to the Fox Sports statistics. So I just want to see like how many average offloads, and then I have a feeling that the Raiders are one of the best teams at stopping offloads, which would make sense. You know, Melbourne Storm, not the best offloading team. Canberra Raiders, one of the best teams at stopping offloads. I'm just trying to find all these bloody stats. Let's come to you straight off the top. Offloads conceded. The Raiders are third in offloads and fewest offloads conceded. So they do a great job at limiting the offloads. They concede 7.8 offloads a game. And then we'll just see how many offloads the Melbourne Storm average per game, just to paint a clearer picture here. The Storm averaged 7.7 offloads. So you had a team that doesn't offload a whole lot coming up against a team that is among the best teams at stopping offloads. That results in just 1 offload for the Melbourne Storm. It's a perfect storm, because you've got a team that stops offloads coming up against a team that doesn't really offload, and that's what you end up with just 1 offload. The thing is about the Melbourne Storm that we've seen recently is that they love to shift the footy. There's kind of been this narrative that the Melbourne Storm are a team who play very basic footy. Basic in the sense that they just run, you know, you hear a lot about playing flat and hard through the middle. They do that where they just hit the ball hard, run, get a quick play of the ball, next man up, hit the ball hard, run, quick play of the ball, Cameron Smith pulling the strings. Along with that basic style of footy is the idea that the Melbourne Storm just execute block plays, where they've got a decoy runner, like they started that with Billy Slater, blah, 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 and Cooper Cronk. Lately, this year, last year, we've seen Melbourne Storm be far more expansive. So they hit those hard and fast runners through the middle, but then they shift the footy because they've got a bit more attacking flair with the likes of Cameron Munster. They got speed out wide. Josh Adokar, Justin Olam, Suliasi Vunivalu. So they've got the guys on the flanks for those early shifts. Now, the Melbourne Storm might only average 7.7 offloads a game, which is dead last for average offloads per game. But if those 7 offloads are efficient in the sense that they lead to something positive, you don't need to offload more. Because you look at a team like the Warriors, who are 4th in average offloads, not a whole lot of those led to anything. It was just offload, and then someone else gets tackled. Whereas the Melbourne Storm, if they're getting 7 offloads a game, I'm fairly confident in throwing this idea up that those 7 offloads are going to lead to something positive. But then if it's only 1 offload, it's nothing. And there wasn't a whole lot of shifting from the Melbourne Storm either. So just in putting that out forward for next week against Parramatta Eels, I suspect we'll see a far more expansive Melbourne Storm team to really challenge the Parramatta Eels. Whereas the Raiders, I think they like it niggly. They like it tight, confined, stop the offloads, just get under the other team's skin, try a few strips as well. That's going to have an impact on offloads. Canberra Raiders love a strip, so they're always touching the ball, they're always around the ball, so you can't offload, can you? If someone else has got their mitts on the footy trying to strip it, you have to double down in protecting the ball so you can't offload the ball. There you have it. That's the NRL wrap. And I'll just quickly move into women's footy because we'll start with this Warriors versus Roosters game. The Warriors have beaten the Roosters twice now. First game, both seasons. But people are still calling it an upset. Bruh. Get over it. The big player for the Warriors is Shante Poko. She has had an amazing rise already in her short international rugby league career. Moved up to Auckland this year. Played for the Kiwi Ferns. Now playing with the Warriors. She had a try. She had... Let me just paint this picture, right? So this isn't to be negative towards Tamaima Ravisa. She is the Fijian Sevens player. She played in the halves for the Warriors versus the Roosters. I believe Tamaima Ravisa is still learning the game. This is her first high-level rugby league game of footy. She's building into her rugby league career. So I believe this was planned. I'm not saying this to be negative towards Tamaima Ravisa, but Shante Poko, her dominance is in this, right? So Tamaima Ravisa had 9 touches of the footy in 60 minutes. Women's footy, 60 minutes, remember that. Shante Poko had 33 touches. So almost at least 3 times as many touches, almost 4 times as many touches. And then Shante Poko did 16 kicks. Tamaima Ravisa, no kicks. Is that sustainable? No way. You're not going to win a competition with one player doing all the kicking and with such a large disparity in the workload in terms of getting the footy. Tamaima Ravisa just sat out on the edge and got the footy when it came to her. Now this is possible because you've got someone like Georgia Hale in the middle of the field. She was a half. Now she's playing as a lock forward. So Georgia Hale can shift the footy and shift the footy out left to Tamaima Ravisa. But over the next week's game and beyond, you're going to have to see Tamaima Ravisa get a whole lot more involved. Shante Poko was excellent though. Her kicking game is sublime. She's got silky skills with her hands. She's got an excellent kicking boot. And she's a big unit as well. So if she runs the footy, she's hard to stop. She had 5 tackle busts as well. So very exciting for Shante Poko. What else do we have here? The Warriors I'd like to see a bit more action from the big boppers up front, Aneta No'osala and Aishali Smalley, because I think they left a bit too much work for Georgia Hale in the middle, but you got the win, so all good. And then the Warriors have the most effective forward was Angelina Leotaua, who went out, I think she played on an edge, and she had 9 runs for 99 metres, so 11 metres per run for Angelina Leotaua, and 7 tackle busts and 2 offloads. So Leotaua, coming off the bench, had the most tackle busts of any Warriors player, and she had the most offloads. That's bench impact. That's Braden Hamlin-Uele, female version in the Warriors women's team. I was very impressed with what the Warriors women did in that game. They were pretty tough defensively. They got around the park well. Shante Poko kicked the ball well. You had pretty good hands. Like, once they settled into their rhythm, they looked too good for the Roosters. And then now there's like things you can build upon. So you can get Tamaima Ravisa more involved. You can, you had a lot of new players in that game. You had Jules Newman, Atafai Tupaya, Madison Bartlett, Ravisa, Kathleen Fortin, Canyon Paul, Billie Jean Ale. Those type of players, it's their first go of footy at this high level. A lot of them have just come from club footy in Auckland or around Aotearoa. Now they're playing at this NRL women's level. So good to get a first up win, and then there's also encouraging signs moving forward. It didn't quite work out for the Dragons. They had Kamiora Ngati in the halves, Whatu Moala, Maitua Federica in the middle, and then Ngā Tokotoru Arakua coming off the bench. They fell to the Brisbane Broncos. Brisbane Broncos with Racine McGregor, Lavinia Gould, Rona Peters, and Amber Paris Hall. I won't talk too much about the Dragons. It didn't work for them in this game, but I am interested to see what happens next. So I'm more just worried about what happens next for the Dragons. Don't want to dwell on that game too much. Federica was dynamic. She had Maitua Federica, that is. She had 12 runs for 121 metres, which was the most efficient effort from the forwards. But then Federica also missed 7 tackles. That kind of explains the Dragons in that game. The big player for the Broncos was Amber Paris Hall. The Richmond Roses, a lot of Richmond Roses playing in this NRL Women's competition. Amber Paris Hall back in the big time professional rugby league, as close to as you can get, I think. 10 runs, 81 metres, 8.1 metres per run. She had a try, she had a tackle, 3 tackle busts and an offload. So Amber Paris Hall, great start to NRL Women's round 2. Rona Peters was pretty damn good as well, the OG veteran. So with the Dragons, it's all about what happens next week and how they go and how they deal with building on what happened this week. And then the Broncos, it's going to be interesting to see if they can maintain and sustain what they did in that first game. And I'll preview all the NRL Women's footy coming up later in the week. So we'll be back later in the week with another Rugby League episode. You know the deal. If you're enjoying the Niche Cast and the Niche Cache, jump on Patreon, support us directly. Otherwise, your ears are more than enough. We appreciate you supporting the Niche Cache and the Niche Cast. Stay beautiful, stay positive, keep learning. Always seek more information. Always help each other. Be the best that you can be. Cheer, cheer. And we'll see you in a few days. Yo.